And we're back for another exciting episode of Your Exit Squad. Mike Finger, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here again, back at Your Exit Squad. Tonight's going to be a partner profile for us. These are the professionals that have joined our group who are interested in engaging our business owner participants who want to make some changes in their business. And I love these stories. I love learning how these people end up doing what they're doing and giving our business owner listeners a chance to really drill down and understand how a relationship like this works from the other side.
That's a great way to put it because, I've worked with a lot of different business owners over the course of the years, and I would have to say that the majority of small business owners that I've met have probably not had a lot of experiences working with, whether it's just consultants that come in to work on a specific problem or some kind of coach or someone who's going to help them strategize or plan or anything like that in their business. And so for many people, they're probably a little bit apprehensive. What does this really look like? What can it cost? What can I expect as far as, what I'm going to get for my money? And is it something that's going to be worthwhile and work?
Absolutely. How do I do this? Why would I do this? I think our guest tonight's going to help us set the table on that. So it's my pleasure to introduce Bob Paden, owner and coach at the Growth Coach of North Indianapolis.
And let's bring Bob in here. Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Excellent,
Good.
sir.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very, very nice to see you here. Bob, get us started. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Fair enough. Reader's Digest version or the long version? No. Short stories, 20-year corporate weenie, I call myself. Grew up in the aerospace industry here in Indianapolis. Ended my 20-year career after 15 years of ownership at Rolls-Royce. And then decided to go off on my own. I was 20 years and 40 years old and didn't want to be 50 and get laid off, bottom line. So, and that took me down a strange path of consulting for a while. It was all good. Figured out that there is an outside world where you can make a living. And that ended up taking me overseas. So I actually ended up working both a consulting gig initially with Qantas in Australia. And then after 9 months of back and forth and super commuting, I'll call it, from my home here in Zionsville, hired on full time, and then moved my family in the January of 12, I believe it was, and finished up that assignment later in the fall of 2012 and came back home. Worked for Cummins for about a year and a half in the power gen market, and then also opened up an engineering office for a company called Quest Global. 3 years, full P&L responsibilities, grew the business to about 70 here and 70 offshore, and then decided I really didn't like the corporate life that much. So went back out on my own, entered the power gen market again, and ended up with a subcontracting business with about 20 plus subcontractors working for me at one given time. But this is where coaching came in. So I found that I really enjoyed the nighttime conversations after 5 o'clock, after the daytime project was finished, reviewing people problems, financial problems, business problems. And during that time in both 17 and 18, just decided that's where I really enjoyed spending my time. And so shifted the business during pretty much the middle of 18 over to coaching. And then as I hit 2019, I met Lisa Hudson, who was my predecessor, the growth coach at Carmel. And I was truly just enamored. She was just one of those people you meet and just go, wow, right? And long story short, she ended up becoming the president of the franchise that's based in Cincinnati. And I ended up buying her franchise in the summer of 19 and haven't looked back ever since. So that's how I got my start, and it's been quite the ride. So,
Bob, a couple things to unpack there, but to start with, what's the difference between a consultant and a coach?
Oh, we get to ask that a lot. Some of us actually, I would say, are consultant coaches. We're slightly, there's a blend, right?
Okay.
Pure coaching is what I would call literally you're never really ever providing pure advice on what the client should do. Right? Clients are experts. They know, they've been there. And in my case, I've got some obviously background that comes to bear, but from a pure coach standpoint, we would always try and drive the client and pull it out of the client of what they want and what they want to do. Whereas a consultant may say, Mike, David, you really just need to do X, Y, and Z. And that's what you're paying me to do to get you from A to B. So, but there is a blend. I think, a lot of us have this conversation both within our franchise and other coaches. The bottom line is we still have experience that can come to bear on a particular problem. So.
Interesting.
And so I find it interesting that you bought this coaching franchise.
Yeah.
Does that mean that your predecessor had built up a clientele that you took over?
Nope. She actually, before she transitioned, coaching's a very personal business, right? So it's very hard to transition, especially for a solo coach. So what I tell you I did receive was a warm introduction and a warm territory. So brand, I did not have to educate people on the brand. And so some just use networking meetings or a dinner or anything like that. I would say, Lisa Hudson and the growth coach, and they go, "Oh, I know Lisa." And that actually provided an incredible amount of traction and value just by itself. So yeah, I pulled some clients with me from my previous business and made those coaching clients, but then built everything else from there.
Interesting. And so the affiliation with the franchisor, what is it that they provide to you? Are there certain tools or frameworks or
sure.
things that, can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I bought it for several reasons. One, I liked my predecessor, and so that made trusting the system a lot easier. But the bottom line is we buy what we call the strategic mindset process. It is what I would call a 5-step process that reviews things through that lens. Everything from self-awareness to being real with yourself and facing the actual reality of your business, which actually Mike and I have talked a lot about with some of the clients and people that we deal with. And so what we get is a basic framework that allows us to customize a particular engagement with a client, whether that be one-on-one or in groups. So we've got everything from what I'll call just pure mindset coaching for leaders, whether that be the CEO or their first line, as well as leadership development, strategic management development. How do we get those middle managers, especially, to go from doer to manager, manager to leader? So,
Bob, why does a small business owner hire a coach?
Oh, wow. It's a great question. Typically, what I would say that if I asked every single one of my clients that answer, they were seeking a different point of view. They wanted an outside influence where call it the forest from the trees, call it looking around corners, trying to figure out how to work through a particular issue or a challenge. And it's really hard to do that by yourself. A lot of, a lot of business owners, even fairly large, mid-sized business, they're fairly alone. They don't necessarily have a peer network to lean on. We talk about they may have a spouse at home, they may have friends, but if they're not owners and they don't live in the business, it makes it really hard for them to truly talk with someone and talk something out. And in some cases, it is literally what I call I'm a phone the friend that literally allows them to vent, and not in just a bad way, but just in a way to actually talk out something that they're trying to, they really struggle with, and just sitting in a room by yourself trying to solve it just can't get it done. And again, we obviously have various backgrounds and experiences that we can bring to bear on their particular business that can help shape some of that conversation as well. So,
Do most do most owners, it's a strange question, but do most owners that you interact with on that prospect front, do they even know why they're talking to a coach? I mean, is it, you described what they might need, but do they know what they need?
I would say 50-50.
Okay.
Some have either worked with a coach or a consultant before. I would say most don't or haven't. And so there is a bit of a learning curve with that. A lot of them confuse us with therapists. I'm not their therapist, right? We're not there to be their psychologist. That's not our remit. Although we do hear things, right? We get to hear it all. But I would say most have used like maybe an outside accountant or a lawyer, but they, a coach, and then we start in that conversation. And, we use the parallels to sports coaching a lot, and it makes it easier to understand that, Tiger Woods has a golf coach, probably has multiple ones. And so it's just a matter of, if you feel that you can do it by yourself, honestly, you're probably not going to make a great client. We're not a crutch, right? We're not there, to fix bad owners. That is, that's a misnomer for sure. It's to get the most out of them, and that's really what it is. So,
and before you arrive, what are some of the stopgap or band-aid measures that you find some people are trying to apply on their own?
They've usually read a lot of books. The ones most of my clients, I'd say, are voracious readers. What they don't necessarily know is how to implement it. They don't know how to integrate it into their business. There's some basic business fundamentals that are the same for everyone, but then there's always the specifics of the particular situation. And so I call it that integration of that concept is where they get stuck. Or they may try something and it doesn't work too well, and then they give up.
Bob, give us a specific example of that. Tell us a story that would illustrate what you just said.
Oh, wow. Let me use live example. So growing law firm here in Indianapolis, it's a client. They've been growing quite quickly. But like any other law firm, they're lawyers. There aren't necessarily people managers. And so when it comes to actual people management and the things that come with that, as you can imagine, most lawyers have a certain style to them. And this is not necessarily a pure litigational firm. So a lot of transactional type work. So when it comes to, they can read all the management and people books, but a lot of the questions that I have with the people that I sit with in their leadership team is, how do I tell Susie that she's not doing a very good job? How do I know that she's not doing a good job? How do I measure her performance? How do I have a performance conversation, right? And some of these things that you'll probably kind of pick up, they're really basic.
Yeah.
But I've also found, and this isn't a dig at owners or anything like that, they just don't necessarily have the experiences that some of us have, where I manage people for 30 plus years, and I can't tell you how many performance reviews and how many people I hired and fired over those time periods. And they just don't necessarily have that type of experience. And then especially if their role doesn't necessarily equate itself to just purely managing people. They're lawyers, they're working on, various law things, whatever those people do, right? They don't sit there and think about, how do I get the most out of my employees from a performance standpoint? So it's just, it's bridging that gap. It's the secret sauce, the space between, whatever you want to call it.
Interesting.
And so you are billed as the growth coach. And
That's
so what, to me, I've never met anyone who called themselves a growth coach before. So, So is it because you're trying to attract a certain type of clientele, or is there a specific subset of experiences that you have that you find you're able to help drive with business clients?
It's a good question. I would, myself, obviously have certain set of backgrounds. Each of the growth coaches across North America and global for that matter, definitely bring different taste and flavor. We've got some that focus solely on banks as an example, or solely on the oil industry. In my case, I describe myself as a generalist specialist. So I've done a lot of things over a long period of time with a lot of different people and a lot of different business models. And so in our case, I've got clients that range everywhere from retail, donut shops, all the way to law firms, to marketing firms, to solo financiers, etc. And so, and then I surround myself with guys, wonderful guys like Mike, as an example, who can bring other things to bear when that, that deeper conversation that may be needed, that, I can't provide the answer to, and that's fine. I don't know everything. Nobody does. So the growth coach really was just around, obviously, business growth, mindset growth of the owner and their leadership teams. I would say it's almost more about the mind than it is the finances, and the two do go together.
So when you meet someone, when someone decides that they're going to engage with you, is it most often driven by a desire to achieve new targets and goals, or is it often because of some kind of issue or problem that needs to be addressed? Is it a remedial thing, or a reaching for the stars kind of thing?
I'd say it's half of both, and it's very rare that I have someone reach out to me where they're just totally tanking, right? I mean, that's pretty rare. I've had a few, but that's pretty rare. Usually it's a plateau of some sort. They've plateaued in revenue, they've plateaued in margin, they've plateaued in people, headcount, whatever you call it. Maybe they've had turnover, those kind of things. And so, a normal business cycle, there is a rhythm to that. And they reach that plateau and they just kind of get stuck. And so some of them are just getting unstuck from that particular place. And then the others, just had a call this morning. It's an early incubator. He's already got one business. He has a second that he's considering. And how do I actually bolt that on and actually take the business to, 3 or 4x what it is today, given that bolt on, and work through that process, the goods and the bads and the uglies.
So I'm sitting here and I'm literally putting myself in the position of an owner who's hearing this, who's thinking about a coach.
Sure.
And Bob, why don't they call? What is it that keeps an owner from doing that outreach? Why don't all owners use a coach? And I'm saying that as an owner who for decades never used a coach.
You want the real truth?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it's ego. The very thing that makes that owner and got them to where they are can now become the thing that holds them back. Because, they've done it out of grit. They had an idea. They made it happen. They formed a team, all those kind of things. And then, they just feel like I should be able to do this myself. And I think that's probably the number one. Some of it maybe is fear, especially if they've had some past experience that didn't go well. And I can appreciate that, right? It's none of us in the coaching industry want to have a bad experience before we show up, right? That makes it really tough. And so we spend our time trying to defend the concept more than even try and help solve the problem. But, I would say it's mostly ego, just and not in a bad way. Again, it's just, owners are owners. There's a certain breed. They wouldn't be owners otherwise. And so it's the very thought that, why should I need an outside help? Why should I have a second opinion? And until they get it, until they have it, and I'll call it's similar to therapists. Nobody wants to go to the therapist until they go. And then once they go, it's like, that's why we go. So that's kind of the same way I equate it. There's just that hump of trust, and it's definitely a trust-based business.
And what would typically be the length of engagement? Is this something that people start working with you because they want to achieve a certain goal or remedy a problem,
Sure.
or is it something that people start and they just keep doing it?
That's a good question. I mean, I tell people at an absolute minimum, you can expect to work 6 months with me, if not a year. And then typically it goes longer than that. And every owner kind of goes through a certain cycle where they, decide, okay, I've got to a certain point. I'm okay for a while, and I'm okay with that, right? There's cycles, I call it, that get momentum, they're really chugging. One example is another lawyer that worked with for 6+ months, fairly introverted, which is typical of a lot of solo lawyers, and really had trouble selling. He just really struggled with selling. And so we worked through, things like a value proposition, what's comfortable for him, of how to sell, trying to take out the mindset of selling's bad and ugly and car sales, ish, and those kind of things. And once we got him through that, then he went into execution mode. And once he hit that mode, he said, Bob, I've got to really just kind of ride for a while. Fantastic. And so we'll catch up again in February or January, after he's had a good, 3+ months of execution of the plan itself. And then we'll work on the next challenge, which he will have. So that's pretty common, but I would say average length, 12 to 18 months.
Okay.
I'm still thinking about the ego answer. And I'm taking that personally, right?
Of course,
decades
T.
of not using. No, I'm what I'm fascinated by, and it ties back into the question of consultant versus coach. I mean, each of these owners that might have this ego block have hired professionals, right? They've done the attorney thing or the accountant thing or the plumber thing, right? There's no ego hesitation about calling a plumber to fix a problem that only the plumber knows how to fix.
Yes.
Why is it ego here?
Because it's them. It's not just what I'll call a business thing.
Okay.
It really is. I would, hate to say it, 80% of the challenge, problem, opportunity is the owner's mindset, how they approach things, how they think through things, how they deal with their people, how they deal with their customers. Have they even thought about certain things? That's so common. And you and I've talked about this before. I look for what I call humble and hungry owners. They're humble enough that they need the help, but they're hungry enough they want something more than they have, whatever that is. And that looks different for every single owner, by the way. What they really want in the end is a totally interesting answer to ask and get the answer for, but they're just not satisfied. And so, but they have to be humble enough to know that they just need help. It's not, how that can be bad. It would be just like a person deciding, I know I've got this medical issue, but I'm never going to go see a doctor, like our male, typical males, right? Just never going to go see a doctor, and I'm going to let this thing fester until it's so bad it's a problem. It's really the same type of mind game, I'll call it.
Sure.
Maybe even I call it head trash too. I've got a great guy that does my insurance named Anson Thompson, and he's the first one I ever heard someone say that it's all head trash, and it's just trying to help clear some of that trash.
Ego and head
it's got you
trash.
thinking, doesn't
No,
it?
It does, because again, we talk with owners here all the time, and the things. The question is, do I lack information or do I lack intention? Is there something? I mean, we talk about learning all the time, and it tends to focus on facts and processes, or I don't understand. But how much time do you spend in facts and processes versus the head trash stuff?
Good question. Facts and figures, 50%.
Okay.
Because
what do I know about my business? How do I read the financials? What am I seeing that I shouldn't? That kind of stuff.
Absolutely. Right. Reading a P&L. Do you have a P&L? All right. Do you know what it's telling you? Do you know the difference between a balance sheet and a P&L? Right. What were your sales last quarter? What were your margins in each of the sections of your business? Those are facts, right? And they do some struggle with those a lot, right? Some struggle in different areas. Some struggle in marketing or sales versus ops. Some struggle in ops and not sales. Some are absolutely clueless in terms of financials other than what cash they have in the bank. They really are. And that's why every owner is different. Everything we kind of work on is different and customized to what their specific need is, but yet still try and cover the gamut of what I call the entire kind of thought space around business, including what is it,
So walk me through a typical coaching session. How
Okay.
did we get started, and what are there? Is it a structured event with certain parts that happen each time?
Sure. I would say the typical structure that I have with my clients involves looking backwards, looking at the moment as we speak, what's happening. So what's happened in the last 2 weeks or month, what's happened right now. And I would tell you 8 times out of 10, there's something. So looking back's always good. It's just kind of, hey, we covered something the last time on topic, and how did that go? Catching up, you tried a new sales technique, you tried a new conversation with a leader. How'd that go? And kind of cycling that through. Then there's usually some particular event that's literally happening as we speak. I've had to fire someone, someone's, my sales just dropped this month and I don't know why, whatever. And then it's look forward. So I'd say of all the consistency, regardless of the topic at hand, we're typically doing that type of cycle for sure.
And so, you're one of our partners. We brought you in to have a talk with Tony, who the audience met last time. And so for someone like Tony, they come in and they have these opportunities and they have these limitations. What does the application of your framework look like for someone in that sort of scenario?
Sure.
Is it about goal setting and then figuring out possible pathways? Like, is it introducing a methodology to the business owner of how to conceptualize these different opportunities? Maybe they've never had to do that before. Can you walk us through what that looks like?
Yeah, it's a good one. I'd say, typically I always start with why. Why are they in business?
Okay.
And then what is their ultimate goal for the business? And in Tony's case, we started to look at what's that look like, 5 years out, 10 years out. What does he want it to do? And sometimes that takes a while to work through, even through that question, right? They've been in the business or done the business and started the business and run it for several years now, but they've really never thought about, what do I want to get out of it? They just, making money or, being able to pay my bills, those kind of things. But in the end, I want them to look a little farther than, the next year or two. It's literally in 5 years' time. What does that look like? And that's where we'll start with Tony for sure. And then typically I would say, aside from things like, do they have a mission statement? Do they know what the vision for the business looks like in the future? Do they even know what values are important to them? And some of that sounds really soft sometimes to owners. They're like, I really want to get into well, slow down, right? What's important to you, right? What do you want it to feel like? What do you want your employees to get out of it? And those kind of things.
Bob, do you carry hammer and nails with you to nail down an owner who's really wants to scream at you about how I hire the next half dozen people I need? You want to talk about mission, vision, and values? How do you?
I would want to know how do I make my widgets cheaper? Like, how do I make them more efficiently? How can I deliver them on time? Like,
how do you take them there?
I call it a very blended approach, right? I'll do that, but that actually gets almost right on the border of consulting. If you want me to tell you how to make your product cheaper, right? May not be a coach for that. I can tell you how to create the process and a team and a system that will make your products cheaper and continue to do that. And how do you do that? But if you want to know, how this gizmo that you're making, right, can be 2 cents cheaper, I may not be the right guy. Now I may know somebody, and we're going to have that conversation if you want to have it, and we'll set that up and make it happen. But that's
so
why do you want it 2 cents cheaper? Right?
But I'm trying to get at how you reframe it for the business owner to understand that these mission and value and all this kind of stuff is actually important.
Yes,
and it's worth our effort and time to work on this stuff because for what it will then deliver later. How do you convince someone that it's we can't just run past that?
Two ways. Typically, it's either is what you're doing now working. Sometimes it's that blunt. And if it's not, there's a reason, because you haven't, both even for yourself, defined what's important to you, where the business is going, so that people can follow. And sometimes, that bears itself in turnover and people leaving or frustration of your management team. And so if they want to eliminate some of that noise, typically it comes with clarity. What is the business? What is it not? What are we doing? What are we not doing? Where am I playing? What am I not playing? And that's what I call it. Sometimes it's a tuggle, right? A struggle back and forth, but that's what I'm there for, right? I'm there to stretch and pull and challenge their assumptions, challenge how they think, challenge even their basic assumptions of the business, if needed, right? And sometimes, there's certain things that people get it and you don't have to spend a whole lot of time on. What I would tell you from a coaching standpoint, the value is in the workout, right? It may not be in that particular topic, right? It just by a silo to itself, it's probably not necessarily where the value is the continued process of pushing and challenging and asking and having to think through things more than they are now. Most business owners don't spend more than 1 hour a month on the business, thinking it as a machine. How do I get the machine to do what I need it to do? They just go, right? Again, the very thing that was their strength that got them there becomes the very thing they need to slow down and actually stop and think about the business as a machine. And I call it the basic business engine. It is literally inputs, what's happening, what's the outputs. And typically, you would be surprised, most owners cannot describe those three things with clarity. So it's part of the process is just challenging the owner to think differently over time.
Can you describe to us one of the biggest transformations you've helped work on?
Sure. Auto repair shop. And I'd say it was a 2-year process. The owner worked in the business every day, probably 60 to 80 hours a week. Over the course of 2 years, we did a few things. The biggest one was learn to delegate and let go. Learn to develop his team so that they could accept those things and hold them accountable to them. And literally in the last 6 months, after 2+ years of doing that, I remember the phone call I got from the owner one day on my cell phone, just kind of out of the blue. It's like, I don't know, 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, "Bob, I'm sitting on the couch. It's a Wednesday, and I don't know what to do at home." Because I challenged him over the time, say, "I want you to make sure on Friday you're not at work. And then 3 months later, I want you to make sure Thursday and Friday you're not at work." And then over the course of 2 years, he got it down to 1 day. And so, obviously that took a little bit of work, but he literally got to the point where he could check in Monday morning, set the tone, take off, set his team on fire, and then go home. And then he was a bit of doing this, which was a great problem. There's other things he should have been doing, but overall, conceptually, it was, okay, you now have created the time. You've created the machine that produces results. And by the way, the results went up. So he wasn't that great, right? I mean, he knows he would appreciate me saying that. But he built a machine and a team that was able to perform with him not being there. And ultimately it's led to a sale, and he's out looking for the next thing now. So he really built, he was probably one of the best examples of what I call an owner that truly knew the dials of how to tweak and fine tune the business, up to the point where if I ask anymore, I'm probably going to, people are going to crack or something, right? Set a great culture of accountability, a fun place to work, loved his customers. The customers loved him. And it was obvious. And I'd say that's one of my best for sure.
What do you think the success rate for coaching is? I mean, not for you in particular, sure, obviously, but just in general. If I'm an owner looking at coaching, what do you think I should reasonably expect, and what should I look for in a coach?
Oh, sure. Well, let me start with what to look for. I think anyone that tells you that I'm going to take you through 6 steps to massive profits or something like that.
You're gonna like 12x my business, right?
Yes, now some of that could be a Bob Paden
I
thing.
heard there's a guy who can 13x.
Yeah, for sure. Flies in corporate jets, all those kind of things, right? I call
that guy 14x's.
Yes, for sure. But I'll call. I think what they should, one, they're checking for fit. It really, again, it's a trust-based business. There has to be a chemistry. If there isn't, it makes it very hard. It just does. Because we are kind of together and we are sharing some really deep stuff. I mean, all the way down to people and, partner problems sometimes, right? If it's not a solo owner, there's all kinds of other things that go with it. And so they do have to trust that coach and figure out how to trust them. And in my business, typically that is through referrals. I work with other people, and it's whether from my own clients or people that I work with around them. They're trusted advisors. That's how they show up in my world. Questions they should ask about, what does it feel like? What am I going to be doing? How do you approach particular things? Even the meeting that we have, are you going to meet in my office? Or are you going to meet outside somewhere? Are you going to meet online? And what's it going to be like? What are you going to do to me in some ways? They need to be asking those questions. And I would say if it's a cookie cutter approach, I would start setting off alarm bells, because I find, even though, again, business is business, there are very specific needs that a business has that they want to achieve that are so different. As an example, I've got owners who their sole goal at the end of the business is to sell it and to have nothing to do with it and go build houses in Guatemala for, disadvantaged and poor children, right? That is their goal. And so whatever I have to do to get there, that's what I want to have happen. I have others who want to do just the opposite. I want to stay in the business up until the day that I literally can't breathe, right? Or, but I don't want to run it every day. I just, I want to be the guy that's kind of there and supporting the team and coaching and et cetera. And I'll let it be an annuity until I'm gone. And then, we'll let the next guy take over. And so every one of those pathways looks different. And so I would want someone asking me, how are you going to help me achieve that? The problem is they haven't necessarily thought of that yet as why they're in business in the first place. So we do run into, David, to your question, a little bit of the chicken and the egg situation, right? I can't help you if I don't know what you want, but if you don't know what you want, how can I help you? And so there is this phase in the middle and at the beginning, call it discovery, whatever you want. That's a little bit of a dance to try and establish what those boundaries are going to be in a pathway. And we'll do that with Tony for sure, is what's he want out of the business. Knowing that first, then that sets, begin with the end in mind and work your way backwards. So.
Yeah. Do you mostly work with people that are in your local area? Do you have a lot of face-to-face meetings?
I do. I'd say majority of my clients are here in central Indiana,
Okay.
but I do have remote. We've, when COVID happened, as you can imagine, that created a whole different dynamic. It's probably how I even met Mike as far as that. I don't know. I have to go back and look, but I do have remote clients. Those come by referrals and those are fine. As fellow growth coaches, we don't market in each other's territories. So we're, obviously sensitive to that. But that's never been a problem. So.
Is the relationship different though? This is what I want to get at. Is it a different relationship with someone that you entirely work remotely with versus someone that you have had face-to-face meetings with?
I would have initially told you it was different, but I don't think it was. I've had enough remote clients now. I've had one for over 2 years. I even started during COVID and kept after that. And while I would love to reach out, sometimes and shake hands, hug, whatever, I don't know. We've had the discussion, and I've even, in some cases offered to hop on an airplane now and fly and just be there just to meet face to face, and don't worry about it. And for me, it's a little like boy, could it be more? I don't know. But in the end, if the client is happy and satisfied and gets value out of it, that's what matters. So I think it's a little bit of both. I remember coming out of COVID when we started to reschedule in-person meetings. And I remember Zoom meetings are much more efficient. It's just like we're doing right now. We could never do this, right? How long would it have taken to have this in person versus it gets it done? And so there is the factor of convenience and time, and honestly, for both parties, that makes that pretty productive. So I would have told you no, but I've been reconvinced. So.
Interesting. I'm hesitating to ask the next question because I don't want it to turn negative, but I'm going to ask anyways. Bob,
sure.
Do the opposite. Tell me what owners should look for that should scare them away from a coach. What is the what are the warning signs? Now you alluded to the
that they know it all.
Yeah, that they know it all.
That they know it all. I can solve all your problems. I think that's absolute insanity, and just not genuinely true. It's their business is so complex now, and maybe 20 years ago that could have worked. I don't think now that's truly possible. I mean, I've touched so many different business types that I've had to actually buck up a little bit and go learn about other things that I haven't been exposed to, just to make sure I know where the client's coming from. But if someone says they are and they can help anybody, to me, that's a big, big red flag. I don't think even between chemistry, background, how you work together, personality styles, you name it. I just don't see that being productive. Everybody's not for me, and I'm not for everybody, and I'm okay with that. That's now that may have taken a while to kind of come to that conclusion, but anybody that says they could just literally help any single business owner, I'm not so sure.
Sure. And how do you and most coaches charge? Is it hourly? Is it flat rate? What?
It's a great
how does
question.
that work?
I can tell you how I do it. I would say, a majority of the market that I know typically is by the hour or by a package. In my case, I do a blend of both. I kind of do a slight, what I'll call retainer, based on the amount of time that owner or the team or organization wants to spend focused outside of the daily business, right? How much time are we going to dedicate every month? And then what's that look like in terms of the engagement? As an example, with a particular owner one-on-one exec coaching, that may just be 2 hours a month. And however, I will tell you, typically, good lawyer language, I'll call it, there's always something. And so I typically bundle things together. I factor in what we're going to do. Obviously I've got prep time as well. That may be more complex depending on the type of situation in the business. And so typically what I do is I set, a 6 or 12 month cadence, once a month or twice a month for a certain amount of time. And within that time period, I throw everything in the kitchen sink in. So whether that's personality assessments and the things that go with it, other tools, financial analysis, those kind of things, I'll just throw all that in just for one flat fee per month to keep it simple. For me, I don't want them to be thinking every time they pick up the phone, how much is this going to cost me by the second? It's not productive. Sure. So I just try and eliminate that from the equation. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Yeah. No. Again, I'm putting myself in the place of that owner sitting out there listening to this, and obviously, we're introducing you because the next episode is going to be the follow up with Tony, sure. And they're going to be able to kind of see that pathway through. But again, my own relationship with coaching over the years has evolved. Like I said, the first couple decades of ownership for me, I was the what do I need this guy for guy, right?
Sure.
And that's been an evolution and an important one for me.
So I'll ask you the question, what made you change your mind?
Well, coming to terms with the reality that I coach made me realize that my lack of experience as a coaching client had an impact.
Oh, interesting.
And so my ability to understand both sides of that, that's kind of defined my career, having sat in different chairs at that table,
Sure.
being able to have that perspective. And this is one where I felt I knew I had, conversations that could be had and needs that could be met that way. But I think you probably pegged me pretty well on that answer earlier. It's a question of ego. Well, why do I need to pay for this? I should be able to just sit down and figure this out myself. And that's not really what this process is about. It's
No,
not about just figuring it out. It's not about finding the right answer. It's about finding an answer that's right for you. And part of that is the elimination of the wrong ones
that's correct.
or the less right ones.
That's correct.
And
I'm glad you said that. That would be red flag number 2, right? And that's why the ones that are just absolutely, I know I can help you no matter what, sets a red flag, because there's too much nuance. There's too much things that aren't said in the moment, et cetera. And it takes time to flush those things out. And you have to make sure in the end, it's the owner's business. It's not mine, right? I don't run their business. All I can do is help pull the things out of them that they, probably haven't spent a lot of time thinking about, even from the very beginning of the business. And we want there to be what I'll call self-discovery. We want them to all of a sudden have aha moments and go, wow, I've never thought of that. And that's what gets us up in the morning, right? May have nothing to do with my particular knowledge of distribution center, how it works or something. I don't know, right? But that all plays into that little bit of that tapestry behind the scenes that gets that owner to that point when they can make good decisions. I want to help them make good decisions.
Yeah.
And sometimes, to your point, there aren't any good options, right? Sometimes those are really hard.
Yeah.
And that's business.
It would seem to me that this is a similar case to any kind of other specialist, dentist, plumber, etc., where the dentist has done so many fillings. They've seen all these cases over and over again. They can immediately apply their knowledge. I see it when I'm looking at helping people with their buy or sell a business, and I'm looking at a particular deal, and maybe it's the 100th dry cleaning set of financials that I've looked at, right? So it's easy to look at it and see what's going on just because of that familiarity. And for most business owners, they're going to be going through some of these challenges for the first time ever without having ever looked at it either from the inside or the outside.
That's correct.
And so they're blazing a new trail if they're going at this on their own, whereas you've helped multiple people before go through it. And you just said, I want to set things up for self-discovery. Well, you probably know what the things are that you want them to discover because you've led people down this path before.
Sure. And it's, I call it, the background that I had that I mentioned that, I've dabbled in a lot of different things over a course of, 25, 30 years that provide, I wasn't a specific aerospace engineer that only focused on X. I knew pretty early on that that's not what I wanted to do. And so when I come into any particular situation, I've done everything from retail to stuffed fiberglass in a dumpster, right? I'll call it, I've been in manufacturing, I've been in distribution, I've been in warehouse, wholesale, I've been in retail, you name it. So that does come into play. And with each of my clients, there are situations, and I tell all my clients that I'm a studier of business models, right? How does a business work? How does it function? How does this one do it versus this one? And there's some really good nuggets in that, if they've never talked to that other type of business and don't know how they function, they just kind of are blind to it. And that could be the very key that changes their whole business or how they at least approach the next year, is just thinking outside their own box. And that gets back to the ego. And, Mike probably knows this, if you have a round table of owners from different markets, different types of businesses, I guarantee you in a 2-hour span, every one of those will walk away with something extremely positive, if not, mind blowing in that course of that conversation. But you got to force them to do it.
Right.
So.
Well, very good, Bob. It's been great to hear more about your story. I'm really excited to hear how you engage Tony. We're going to have him back after you guys have worked together and get a chance to understand better how that process is helping his business evolve.
You bet. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Awesome. And Bob, if people are curious to learn more about you, where can they go and find you online?
You betcha. Obviously, www.thegrowthcoachofnorthindy.com. Do any growth coach search and type in Indianapolis and it'll pop up for sure. So, and obviously on LinkedIn, all those kind of things. I'm there. Look for the cup of coffee. That's my yes.
Awesome, Bob. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Great to talk, Bob.
You bet. Thanks, Mike.
Well, I got to tell you, Mike, I learned quite a bit there. I mean, I help coach people through the process of buying or selling a business quite often, but I think it's a little bit different than just, helping someone with their business and what they're trying to achieve, because I'm following a particular series of guideposts, along a particular journey. Right. And when Bob meets people, he's got this much more of a blank canvas in front of him of where he might be able to take these people.
Right. And what success actually means to them. Or that process of, I want this, but that's not enough to just get that answer, right? I want to grow my business to 5 million. Okay, well, let's figure out how to do that. Or why 5 million? What does that represent? What are we actually trying to achieve by that, right? You start picking some of that stuff apart and it goes a very different direction. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what Bob's able to do with Tony and his business.
Now, Bob came into the picture here with your Exit Squad through your network of professional colleagues that you have out there. But if someone else out there was like Bob and worked with small businesses, how might they be able to come and join with us and potentially help some of our guests?
They can jump over to your Exit squadpartners.com. There on the screen, you see it, yourexitsquadpartners.com. There's a short application to fill out, and it's going to give you the ability to allow us to put you in touch with some of our small business participants. And again, we focus on exit here, but as we learned from Bob, this isn't just about exit, because sometimes to change your business so you can exit, we're focusing in other areas, right? So if you're a generalist, a coach like Bob, a marketing expert, an accountant, all of those folks, we're running across those needs that owners have. And David, if I was an owner that wanted to participate here at your Exit Squad, how could I do that?
Well, aren't they supposed to just call you on your telephone?
That's right. Just.
Oh, no, sorry. Wait. No. Okay. I got it. There's another website. It's yourexitsquadguests.com is the place where small business owners can go fill in a form to let us know your story. And then if it's a fit, we can have you on and potentially work with one of our experts to help make some improvements or changes in the business.
That's right. And last but not least, yourexitsquad.com is going to bring you to the YouTube channel where you can subscribe and not miss an episode.
That's right. And if you are watching this program, if someone shared it with you on social media or whatnot, it's a really big help to us if you click the like button. If you share it further on to your own social networks, whether you share it from YouTube onto Twitter or onto Facebook or anything like that, it'd be a big help for us. And if you're listening to the audio, please leave us a review on whatever app or platform it is that you use to listen to podcasts. All of that stuff is so important, especially for a new show, to gain traction and have those, automated algorithms start to suggest our program to other people who may derive great value from being able to hear these stories.
Absolutely. Great advice.
Yeah. And with that, this has been awesome. It's good to see you again, Mike.
Nice to see you. We'll see you next time.
All right. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye now.